and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Sunday the 29th of May, I'm Andrew Wilson and this is the Full Scottish. We're on the road today, we're in Aberdeen for the Aberdeen Independence Movement's Progress to Yes conference, so we have a slightly different format to our programme today. However, as usual this afternoon, I have an update for you from Ukraine on day 95 of Russia's illegal invasion. Then I'll introduce you to our two fantastic guests, and then together we'll talk about the conference and the independence movement and some of the news items that we've heard and read in the past 7 days. Ukraine is urgently pleading for heavy weapons to repel Russian forces in the eastern Donbass region, as relentless Russian artillery and airstrikes threaten to turn the tide of the war, and support for Kyiv's continued defiance among some West European allies appears to be slipping. Ukrainian officials say that they urgently need advanced US-made mobile multiple launch rocket systems which are capable of striking targets up to 300 kilometres away in order to halt Russian advances in Luhansk and Donetsk. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has conceded that not all the land that Russia has seized since it annexed Crimea in 2014 can be recaptured militarily. While he is certain his country will take back the territory Russia has claimed since its 24 February invasion, he said other territory could not be recovered by force. Russia's defence ministry claims to have captured the strategically important city of Liman and several other smaller towns and to have encircled Severodonetsk, which Ukraine denies. Zelensky said in a Saturday night television address that conditions in Donbass were indescribably difficult, and he thanked Ukrainian defenders holding out in the face of the onslaught. At least 6 super yachts linked to UK-sanctioned Russian oligarchs have gone dark on ocean tracking systems, vanishing from the global maps that are used to locate marine traffic. The owners of these yachts will almost certainly realise they are at risk of being targeted in a global hunt for the assets of Russia's super rich. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has scrapped the upper age limit for military recruits in the face of mounting losses in Ukraine, TASS has reported. UK intelligence estimated this month Russia has lost about 1/3 of its ground forces. Officials in the southeastern port city of McCulloch said at least 1 person was killed and at least 6 injured in Russian shelling. 2 rounds landed in courtyards of high-rise buildings and 1 shell fell close to a kindergarten, CNN has reported. Boris Johnson and Vladimir Zelensky discussed concerns over food supplies in a phone call. A Downing Street spokesperson said Johnson told Zelensky the UK would continue to support Ukraine's armed resistance, including by supplying equipment. She added that the UK was involved in intensive work with international partners to find ways to resume the export of grain from Ukraine in order to avert a global food crisis. Vladimir Putin spoke to the French President Emmanuel Macron and the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and according to the Kremlin, he told them that continuing arms supplies was dangerous, warning of the risks of further destabilisation of the situation and aggravation of the humanitarian crisis. And Spain is sending a battery of surface-to-air missiles and about 100 troops to the NATO Forward Presence mission in Latvia, joining about 500 compatriots already present in the Baltic state, according to the Spanish newspaper El País. Now then, because we're at the Aberdeen Independence Movement's Progress to Yes conference today, we have 2 extra special guests joining us on the Full Scottish today. Firstly, I'm joined on my immediate left by Councillor Jennie Nicol. Jennie works as part of Aberdeen Independence Movement and was recently elected to Aberdeenshire Council. Jennie, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on the Full Scottish.
Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be here.
And also we're joined today by Alex McCulloch. Alex works with the National Yes Network and also Yes Southside in Glasgow, and he's been speaking at the conference this afternoon already. Alex, good afternoon. How are you keeping?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Richard.
Well, it's great to have you for you both to be joining us this afternoon. And as I said in the introduction, we'll talk about the conference today. We'll talk about wider issues and challenges for the independence movement, and we may touch on some of last week's news as well as we go along. But firstly, Jennie, as aim or the organisers of today's Progress to Yes conference, and as you are one of the people who works very hard in the Aberdeen independence movement, can you give people who haven't been able to travel to Aberdeen today perhaps a flavour of what's been happening here so far today and what else is going to happen?
So I think it was important for us to get people together after COVID. It was going to be a case that we wanted an in-person conference. People are all zoomed out. They're all a little bit fed up of being in Zoom. And don't get me wrong, there's lots of things we can go forward with that's going to be great working hybridly, but getting to meet in person is going to be important for the Yes movement, getting our messages out to people. It's really nice to have so many groups. We've got, I think, 40 different groups here today talking about different issues. And with being in Aberdeen, we're talking about just transition as well.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Jenny. And certainly you could see when delegates were arriving today, you could see the change in the interaction between them with the interpersonal nature of it, especially as we've all been thoroughly zoomed out over the past 2 years. So a definite change in atmosphere and an awful lot of smiley, happy people that you wouldn't necessarily see smiling on Zoom. So Alex, turning to you, as I said, you were speaking, you've already spoken at one of the meetings today so far. So can you give us a flavour of what you were talking about?
Yeah, certainly. First of all, sorry for renaming you.
That's quite all right.
That's a theme I might return to, Andrew.
I answer to anything apart from abuse.
Yeah, like Jenny said, it's great to bring everyone together. The conference is called Progress to Yes. I think there's a tangible sense of energy in the air that something's about to happen in our country. I think most of us in what's known today as the Yes movement believe that the timetable for a referendum will be announced in the coming months, and that kind of changes our situation, and we're here today to think about how do we prepare to move into that new reality of an actual campaign towards a referendum day.
Thank you, Alex. That's ideal. I will talk to you a little bit about that. I was struck about a week ago, 10 days ago. The former MSP, Professor Adam Tompkins, was writing in the Herald and then it was covered in other press, and he made a number of points. And as you would expect, it was an opinion piece, and it was as you would expect, it was contentious to an extent. That's the way you write newspaper columns, I guess. However, one of the three things that he was focusing on was that, from his perspective, there is going to be no repeat referendum on independence anytime soon, says Professor Adam Tompkins. Now, he's not an elected politician anymore, so it's not up to him. But in terms of one aspect of the conference today and progressing to yes, do you think from the delegates that you've spoken to, you're hearing people saying that yes, there will be an independence referendum and people need to begin preparing and planning for that?
Absolutely. Personally, I think it's irrelevant because we have to start campaigning anyway. If we want our country to be independent and we believe that that's better for all of our fellow citizens, then we have to move forward in that direction to engage them and get them to believe in Scotland and to believe specifically in an independent Scotland. So, yeah, I don't think anyone here today has any energy for debating the process or whatever any longer. I think we're all able to accept that, yeah, a referendum will come when it will come. I think we believe now that, yeah, the wheels are in motion, the mandate's there, we trust our elected politicians and our First Minister that what they've laid out before us will happen shortly. Obviously, they're entitled to choose the moment relevant to other events round about, but I would think everyone here would be amazed if a referendum date is not announced sometime this year and a referendum takes place next year. Of course, once the date's announced, other forces will determine whether we're allowed to hold that, but again, all of that's irrelevant because the real objective of the conference today here is to engage our fellow citizens to choose independence as and when they're given the opportunity to do that. And that might take quite a while. and we might have to do that a bit differently than what we've done in the past.
Yeah, and we keep seeing that Scotland is taking just a different path to what's happening at Westminster.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to ask you, first of all, Jennie, in terms of you've recently been on the doorsteps, you've recently been campaigning successfully in Aberdeenshire, and you're now an elected councillor. In terms of what the messages you were hearing on the doorsteps or the feedback you were getting during the very recent council campaign, and I appreciate it's a council election, it's not a national election, however, in my experience, people still want to talk about these things. What were the messages and what was the feedback you were getting when you were campaigning regarding the imminence or otherwise of a second independence referendum?
Yeah, I found it quite strange that there's a lot of support out there for both Greens and SNP as indie parties, but there's still an awful lot saying, no, we will vote for you, but we're not set on independence yet. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we're there yet on converting that vote. An SNP vote isn't necessarily going to then vote yes. And we need to reach out and be able to convert that. And we need to start working on that now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jennie. Alex, I think, were you talking about some of those engagement points earlier on today?
Yeah, to a degree, I was floating a straw man of how the campaign, I suppose, has never really stopped. Mm-hmm. The second independence referendum campaign started some 2,800 days ago, the day after the last referendum. But I think it's time, maybe, as we're all together, to reflect and say, how do we develop it? So we want the nation to progress to yes, but the movement maybe also has to say yes to progress. Mm-hmm. If we do what we've always done, we may get the same result, which is not what we want. So I talked about maybe different ways of campaigning, and ultimately how do we engage our fellow citizens to talk to us, to engage with us about how they see what would be better in their own communities, in their own daily lives.
Absolutely, thanks, Alex. And Jennie, in terms you've been campaigning in politics in Aberdeenshire for a while now, most recently during the council election. Did you sense at all that people's responses are beginning to shift or change? Can you see? Did you detect any movement so far?
I think that there's that difference in what we vote for isn't what we get. That still is coming, because it ends up we still see a Tory government in Westminster who isn't actually looking after us and isn't looking after people in the sort of nation that we're looking to. That we're looking to a wellness nation, and yeah, I think long term that's going to be. Let's look at the differences. What is it that we want to look forward to?
Absolutely, thanks, Jennie. And just to expand that point a little bit, and talking about Adam Tompkins, I'm not going to quote him all day, I promise. But it was an interestingly contentious piece, which is why I was looking at it. But the second thing that he said in his piece in the Herald was that what he described it as the second unspeakable truth, except this time it's the unionists that cannot utter it. And that unspeakable truth is that Scotland would vote for independence this time because a narrow majority of mainly younger voters, to your point, would determine that independence, in Adam Tompkins' words, is a price worth paying to escape the United Kingdom. It would be close, it would be contested, but the voters of Scotland would be punishing Westminster and Britain for Brexit, for COVID mismanagement, for failing to reform and adapt itself, for callous disregard and corruption in government, and for the man who, to many people, embodies all of these failures, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So in Scotland, of course, in the UK context, leads the way in bringing younger people into the electorate, giving them a vote. So what did you feel your messages you were hearing from potentially younger voters when you were campaigning, and before, since you've been campaigning during COVID and in the run up to where we are now?
Yeah, I've had some really nice stories. It was nice seeing people at polling stations voting for the first time, and they're looking, going, "I'm not voting Tory. No way we can vote Tory." So yeah, I think these young people, we need to reach out as well on social media. We need to probably work better on our social media campaigns and how we target young voters and see what the issues are with them. because that's going to make a huge difference to our vote next time.
Absolutely, thanks, Jenny. And Alex, that's an interesting point in terms of listening to and engaging with young voters as an example, as a subset. A broader topic, I think, today is discussing how the independence movement engages with the wider population, those who are undecided or might be persuaded to perhaps to change their vote. So, do you think that there are lessons to be learned in terms of the way in which the movement engages with young people that can be extrapolated across the wider movement, or should it be the other way around? We learn, as you were saying, from the past. Maybe don't campaign in the same ways we did in the past, but by those means that then begin to engage younger voters.
Absolutely, I think it's something as a movement we need to think about. I think Adam, an unspeakable truth in independent Scotland. I don't know if we agree with that. I also disagree with his view that an independent Scotland will arise because we're voting to protest and move away from something that's not good. I do believe what he described as fact and reality, and I think without us saying a word, I don't believe we even need to comment on that. Our ordinary fellow citizens will now be considering that maybe change is something that they should think about. But if we want to become independent, it will not be what they move away from, it will be what they move to will decide whether they actually vote for a Scotland to become independent. And that's the premise that I'm floating today, is that we need to introduce into a conversation more of what we could do in the future, what choices and options arise with independence, whose voices are heard in independence, which will include Adam's, and his views will put a brake on other people's views, and everyone will be represented. I think everyone needs to be represented now in the conversation, not a conversation just within what was formerly the Yes movement that I may rename shortly.
Absolutely, and you make a fair point, and I'm not going to talk about Adam Tompkins anymore, but I am minded that he has made a journey in terms of his politics, having started as a communist politician, ending up as a front bench Tory spokesman in the Scotland's Parliament. So who knows where his journey is going to end? And that's maybe an approach we take with all of our fellow citizens in terms of talking to them about those journeys. But Jenny, to come back to the conference that we're at today in Aberdeen, the Progress to Yes conference that's been organised by the Aberdeen Independence Movement, can you see that, are there any either general intentions with regard to the movement that AIM would like to see coming out of today's event, or is there anything specific that AIM would like to achieve out of today?
I think the North East is one of these key areas where overwhelmingly voted no. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing when you actually speak to people, the reasons that came about as to why they thought about voting no. We're probably going to look and see how we can change them around, and that is going to be going door to door. We're going to have to do that kind of campaigning as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we need to start having these conversations in groups like we've seen today. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, as we've already said this afternoon, the conversational aspect of campaigning, of a national campaign, and of the way in which our population as a whole moves forward is going to be really important. Can you, of the almost 40 groups that are represented here today, can you see any particular themes or any particular ways or aspects coming out from those groups that you think are going to be important in terms of those conversations you were just talking about?
I think we're looking for fairness. We're looking for fairness in our politics. We're looking for fairness in an independent Scotland. And I think all the groups today, all that themes are coming through. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about how we're going to go forward. It's like you were talking about earlier, how we are going to go forward and the future, not just talking about how did we get to this point here.
Yes, no, that's a very interesting point. Alex, you made it eloquently before that. In it, there's the aspect of a lot of our politics are expressed about the here and now, with a politics that's dominated by a 24-hour rolling news cycle. Everything happens instantaneously, and so we and of course there's the small matter of a platinum jubilee later this week, which seems to be fixated on looking backwards, and those seem to be up to and including the not entirely unexpected announcement from Downing Street that they want to consult about returning to feet and inches and poles in the yards and everything else, which struck me as being perhaps just being a great representation of the backwards-looking nature of UK politics at the moment. Do you think, in terms of the way in which the next campaign, or the extension of the campaign that's never stopped, do you think that that people are going to be receptive to conversations about talking about potential futures in an independent Scotland?
We won't know until we start them, is what I would say to that. I think the other conversations will continue. There's different strokes for different folks. Mm-hmm. There are a group of our fellow citizens who will only move for change if their personal situation improves, probably financially, and they need some information to do that. We have dozens of experts to do that. As part of the kind of yes movement, I've strived to be able to do that, but I'm not one of those experts, so I'm going to try and contribute by talking about the future and something else, and leave our MPs, MSPs, councillors that are better informed and better able to articulate the more facts and truth of the resources that are available in Scotland, and why people should be confident that they wouldn't be financially worse off if we became independent. In fact, the contrary, albeit the contrary will be through time. Mm-hmm. No one's going to be richer the day after we vote for independence. There's a lot of work to do. But I think what can maybe engage people is talking and describing and painting a picture for them of what else can be different the day after we're independent, or start to be different the day after we're independent. For example, a key theme that comes through where we've already engaged our citizens by asking them in citizens' assemblies for everything, is that there's a wish and a desire for more citizen participation. So for me, if that's what people want as a movement, why don't we start with that, with more citizen participation, and find methods and techniques to do that? We don't have to look too far, because we happen to have a political party that has won 15 elections in a row, and have got the majority of the country supportive of the progressive approach. So what I think is we need to recognise that, not criticise it, and then bring together the other powers and talents and resources that we have in the movement to get a snowball effect, and really use our talents, resources effectively, but surprise and engage people by maybe a slightly different tune.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex. Now, Jennie, Alex was talking about the economic case and the economic issues, the challenges, people being motivated by their own economic circumstances, and was also talking about resources. Now, we know from the analysis of the Westminster Chancellor's statement this week that of the £5 billion of the windfall tax, the levy as he calls it, which is being added to the additional borrowing that he's making in order to fund a small attempt to address the cost of living crisis that is engulfing the country at the moment. We do know that of the £5 billion raised from the windfall tax, that more than 4.5, if not more, will be raised very much in the northeast of Scotland. It will be raised from the taxing of the profits from the extraction of oil and gas from the North Sea and elements of the Atlantic. So, given that we're in Aberdeen today, and given that I'm talking to a councillor from Aberdeenshire, what's your and you've got experience of the view that people had here in 2014 and have been expressing since. What's your sense about the approach that people in Aberdeenshire and in the city of Aberdeen are taking, both to the economics, also to their recognition of how important the industry, a reminder of how important the industry is, and the fundamentally important nature of the work and the economy in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire.
Oh, well, that's a rough one. Unfortunately, the North East just seems to back up Westminster when it's needed, as always has been. And when we've suffered up here in recession, it's been just us in sort of a little microeconomy. And then other way round. At one point during the recession in 2009, we were the only, apart from London, we were the only area that had any growth. Yeah, it's got to be the northeast that backs it up. It's the issue there is we're not translating these jobs into green jobs. We're not translating them to renewables. There should be a just transition. There's been a report recently. Gillian Martin, MSP, was working on a report for this. The problem is we really need to get these workers into the renewables industry, but they're not finding the funding in order to convert their experience and their qualifications either. And it should be that we can. These skills are transferable. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how I want to respond to that.
It's an interesting point that you make, though. The one, and I'm generalising, and I'm sure I'm overgeneralising here, but there is, to me, an aspect of economic activity in the northeast, not just in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire, but in the northeast generally, where there is a particular strength in terms of those who are self-starters. There's an awful lot of small and medium businesses, be they agriculture or offshore or anything else in the northeast, and also that those businesses have been very able to embrace change and to make progress through change. I'm thinking of Wood Group as being the best example, starting with 3 trawlers, I think, and now being the largest oil services business on the planet. And we're not going to talk about Serene Wood's view about whether or not the oil's going to run out. That's for a different day. But it struck me that there is a theme, there's a thread here in terms of the self-starting nature of people in this part of Scotland, and the ways in which those businesses have evolved over time. So I'm sure that in the 70s, money was the motivation for that change and those evolutions, because in many ways there was a lot of money coming into the sector, into the oil sector, from out with the UK, be it construction of offshore jackets at Kishorn or on the west coast, or in terms of the servicing of the developments in the North Sea. So what do you think, and that's a very long introduction, my apologies. What do you think, are we going to be able to motivate, to trigger that kind of major industrial change again in the northeast, to secure the just transition, to secure the training and the green jobs that are necessary, both in terms of decarbonising our economy generally, but also in terms of supporting the northeast? I
hope so. I think as well, our industries that aren't related to oil and gas here are still reliant on oil and gas. I, not so long ago, had a shop and post office. We were kept going when the oil dropped because we were building a major road in the AWPR, as an example. Yes. That, if it hadn't been for something like that, there just wouldn't have been the money probably flowing in the area, because there was still people coming here at that time. I can't imagine what it's going to be like if sort of the money isn't there for oil and gas, moving on to then sort of greener industries and renewables.
Thanks, Jenny. Now, Alex, expanding that point a little bit, we've been talking about the northeast specifically. There's a definite theme from the last 2 Tory governments in terms of taking money out of the economy. We've heard Westminster talking about, the Tory party talking about cutting 90,000 civil service jobs across the UK, and some of us are reflecting on the economic damage that will likely do, taking away 90,000 people's incomes. So in terms of translating the message from the northeast, in terms of green jobs and a just transition here, for other parts of Scotland, be it the south of Glasgow or be it elsewhere, do you think that is there a positive message there in terms of working as Scotland, where we can begin to identify Scottish solutions to Scottish challenges, and make sure that they have a benefit for people across the country?
I think Scottish solutions to Scottish challenges is called independence.
Yes.
So what you've described there, I mean, Platinum Jubilee weekend, 5 billion windfall tax, dilemmas to solve in the northeast. Events, my dear boy, events. And we'll always have events, good, bad, challenges. We'll also always have opportunities. And I think what we're trying to engage our people to to talk with our fellow citizens is, first of all, to provoke a bit, to say, if you want a better reality, you have to take a bit of responsibility, you have to get involved and engaged. And the nature of the debate, I think understandably, has disengaged very many people. But the consequence of that is an awful lot of them, over 1 million people in our country live in poverty, are having a very hard existence. So the conversation has to be is, how can we work towards that existence becoming better than today? How can we shape that? And what choices do we have that might allow us to thrive in good times, but survive maybe to a better extent in bad times? And obviously, we believe having their own choices and own abilities to use the resources as we choose could be better than that. Hopefully, our politicians and those in government now, and if we became independent, could enable some very quick changes to do that, because we could allocate our resources differently immediately. But we have to be honest that a lot of the changes will be over time, and that's only correct because everyone should have a voice in how we shape those changes.
Absolutely. And I was thinking that today, for example, here at Aberdeen Independence Movement's Progress to Yes conference, that by definition, the people who are attending and are contributing and participating today are probably those who display what in some quarters is described as the cringe in Scotland, the view that we should not or cannot, we are not, as Johann Lamont said, we are not programmed to take political decisions in Scotland, although nobody agreed with her when she said it. But the notion that that we are too wee or too poor or too stupid, to use a very trite saying, do you think that in terms of addressing that aspect of the Scottish personality, or maybe saying that aspect doesn't exist, do you think that there's a prospect for the movement to address that reticence of some part of our fellow citizens to step up, step forward, take part, to participate, to think about the future?
I don't agree with that. Scottish people are as capable as any other people in trans. There's centuries and centuries of evidence of that. What we have to talk to the people about is direction and ideologies, and I think that type of thing that myself or people wouldn't be familiar with is becoming clearer. The different paths that Jennie describes that our two governments are on are clear, and we have to highlight a bit more of unfortunately the progressive things that are making things less worse rather than really good, but it's still less worse, and why that is. And if we go more in that direction, can it become better actually than just less worse, if that's not too intangible? But we have the resources, the talent, the ingenuity. We have made significant contributions to the world over time. We need to use all that now for our people here at home now. 1 million people in poverty, 1 in 4 children in poverty is not acceptable. For most of the people in the movement today, independence won't make much difference to them. The people that I see coming to meetings they're not rich, don't get me wrong, but they're not under the duress that maybe a lot of our fellow citizens have. So we need to go out and understand how we can work together with them. And if we believe that becoming independent is best for them, we need to tell them why we think that, what would be different, and see if they agree or challenge us or offer us even better solutions.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex. And Jennie, in a similar vein, similar question to you, and either in campaigning recently or more generally, do you see, have you been hearing any manifestations of the alleged cringe of people not feeling that they are able, for whatever reason, to step forward and take control of their own destinies and their own lives by securing independence?
Yes, to a certain extent, I must admit, we're politically minded, and I think it's easy when you start speaking to more people who are politically minded. You assume everybody is like that. That's just not the case. People are fed up of elections. We've had a lot. We've had Brexit, and I think there was a certain amount of we're going to vote again. Now, I don't feel that way. I love going to vote. I love going to the polling station. I love taking my kids. But there's that kind of aspect, we're going again. And it doesn't seem to make any difference. We need to be able to say, this is going to make the difference. This is going to be important for us and for our future.
I think just to come in there, in terms of thinking about how we evolve our campaigning, timing is an aspect of that. So, and again, it's difficult because it's just my opinion,
yes.
But maybe we don't dive straight in. Maybe we build up the resources, we plan, we prepare, we give ourselves a break. We've just had a pandemic. People are suffering the trauma of that, ourselves included, whether we're conscious of it or not. So maybe we have to just pause and think and be a bit smarter and say, we don't have to tear off immediately. Mm-hmm. If we think, and the majority of people seem to agree that we do need to change the tone, mm-hmm. Well, we can't just change it tomorrow. We need to think about how, when, where, who we change it. And then maybe, as Jennie says, maybe the biggest thing we could do to engage people is nothing. Let them stabilise in their lives, enjoy the summer, and then we get ready.
Yeah,
and
how do we lead a strong campaign
maybe if we
as well?
become less visible, when we become visible again, perhaps in a different shape and, dare I say, brand, that will have huge impact, and maybe that will engage the people.
Alex makes a very good point, Jennie, and I'm not going to use military metaphors, I promise. But the idea that the independence movement needs to run towards a problem instantaneously as soon as it's identified and engage with it as best it can. People have been campaigning for independence in the current cycle, if you will, the current politics. People have been campaigning for independence in Scotland since 2012. So they've been at it for 10 years now. And I think there is an aspect that there is a degree of exhaustion or tiredness, or people, and you know, such campaigning can be at risk. I'm not saying it has, but it can be at risk of becoming stale, either on the minds of the campaigners or on the minds of other voters. So do you think, and as Alex rightly said, we have come through a very unusual period in terms of the stresses and strains of the pandemic, austerity, pandemic, now even greater austerity and a cost of living crisis. Do you think what in terms of the outputs from today's Progress to Yes conference, do you think that there's likely to be a period of reflection or contemplation about how we start to move a campaign forward?
I hope so, because I hope we're going to need to lead a really strong campaign, and it needs to be sort of cohesive amongst us as well to work out what we're doing. I don't know. I hope so. I'm not sure.
One aspect of the comparing, as you've both been saying, comparing where we were in 2014 and the campaign leading up to that referendum, one aspect was that it's been commented by many that it was very much, and the eventual results, I think it could be said, underline the point that those who were at the forefront of the campaign leading up to 2014 were the creative classes, if you will, the musicians, artists, painters, performers, and strong working class areas. Dundee, yes, cities just down the road. Glasgow also the strongest vote for independence. Do you think that conferences such as we have today with Progress to Yes, and the contemplation and consideration that this will generate within the independence movement, do you think that may have this? Think that might change the nature of the sorts of people who are engaging at the front of the campaign for the next independence referendum?
I hope so. I hope that it's going to be a more wide range and diverse sort of group. There's a lot of people who were indie activists last time, and we're now all councillors, MSPs, MPs. We need to look at where all our grassroots activists went and what we're going to do to bring them back, because the ones that are there are tired. They've been fighting campaigns now for the last sort of almost 10 years. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So, Alex, how do you think, or do you have any thoughts about the way in which the bringing the fizz back to an independence campaign, if that's what's required, and you can say that it doesn't, but in terms of rebooting an independence campaign, what thoughts do you have?
Do you have any thoughts? How long have you got? And it's a challenge for me as much as anyone else, mm-hmm. to not give my view, I'm right, this is what I believe, and everyone can do it. We've got all that passion. What I'm striving to try and contribute with is a way how to bring that cohesion that Jennie mentioned. Now, if you humour me, I can freewheel for a bit as to try and describe that. Now,
Jennie and I will step
this
in.
is maybe some simple things here, but it might just get people thinking and talking. And sometimes simplicity is a virtue, right? So I haven't prepared this, so I'm going to go freewheel a bit here.
Of course.
But we have the National Yes Network that I've been representing today as a group, and we connect people in all the Yes groups. We share best practice, ideas and all that, and that's happened for a while and it's great. And obviously we need to continue to connect activists and get more. We also have the SNP, who can connect with tenfold those amount of people with a membership. So I'm kind of thinking, maybe we should combine, and it'll involve both organisations compromising and collaborating. And there'll be problems, data protection and stuff like that, but we can solve any problem. And that's only two organisations. I suggest that all organisations need to reflect and say there, I believe people are looking for cohesion and leadership. And in terms of leadership, you can lead from the front, the middle or the back. And the activists that they're not finished, but have done a lot of service over the years, maybe they now need to lead from the middle and the back, use their expertise, use the resources of campaigning that we know what to do, but we need to bring in new energy to actually execute it. And that's also important because we need to look different also. Present company accepted, but some of us are getting older and greyer and we don't represent our country. We need to get that diversity in the movement, so we have to engage people that are not in the movement today to join it, which immediately, if we set our first target is not to persuade people for independence, is to persuade people to get engaged in the conversation. If that works, we have twice as many activists soon as we have today, which means twice as much funding, etc, 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 and it's a snowball effect. I would suggest we let the campaign experts, the Green Party, the SNP party, for the next while, go and try and increase their membership, right? Get funds in by doing that. I don't know if they've actively done that for a while. So right away, what we call the movement has more funds. And then that's it, they've had their chance, and they apply that to the political campaign, which will carry out in the mainstream media and social media. Beyond that point, I think we should then create, and for the sake of a name, I believe it should be I Believe in Scotland as an umbrella movement. From my opinion, when I've been interfacing with all different movements, the vast majority of people that are active today seem to believe, we've walked off, we've tried different solutions, yourself included, Andrew, seem to believe that, yeah, we get, in terms of preparedness for campaigning, what we need from Believe in Scotland. I think Believe in Scotland also need to compromise and also think about changing the tune from what the issue today. We can maybe do a bit more of that, but further down the line, it needs to evolve to more well-being and even better Scotland, etc. Because all the other stuff will be carrying on in the suits and ties on the telly, boring people to death, I would suggest. So there's sort of solutions, but what I'm really promoting is, let's develop the campaign, let's mature ourselves, use our experience, recognise we're in a different. You can have a voice, have an opinion, and start to change the reality in your street, in your area, in your life, in your community. And actually, if you keep going and the government works with you and gives you more voice in a formal, structural way, you can change a country, and maybe our country can inspire the world to change some ways of doing things. And we start to talk about maybe well-being approaches as well, because it's not just us, the rest of the world's changing. A lot of what's happened up to now for the last few centuries is becoming obsolete in front of our eyes, and we can engage people to say, actually, things are going to change anyway because our current structures are not fit for purpose, so why don't you tell us how we should best change it?
Good point.
There you go.
There we go.
You did ask.
I did. You're right. I did ask the question. Now there were a number of interesting points in there, but one thing that struck me immediately, and for you, Jennie, again having been campaigning recently on the streets, the nature of political campaigns, be it for a party or for an idea or for a referendum, I was interested to talk to you about what you feel are the differences or not the differences between campaigning in rural Aberdeenshire, for example, to campaigning in the Western Isles or the Western Highlands, where the geography is even more of a challenge, and in comparison to campaigning in Lochee and Dundee or in Muirhouse and Edinburgh, in my case. Is it different? Is it different? Different messages, or delivering the same message in different ways, and using organisations like the National Yes Network? Should we be tailoring the message or tailoring the way in which the message is delivered, depending on what the local community and the community you're trying to engage with, depending on what they are looking for and what works for them?
We're going to have to in the northeast, I would think. I would think we'll have to in the northeast, because it's a different beast campaigning in the northeast. It was interesting what you said, because I found that the best kind of engagement I was having with the community was when I was out doing litter picks. When you were out just getting to speak to people and they go, oh, you're that SNP lassie. But they're having the conversations about things they want in terms of planning, or things that they want to develop in their community and tiny projects. But those conversations are what bring people on side. You know, I think it's going to be interesting.
I bet you people ask you about refuse collection and
always bins
right.
and potholes.
So maybe we can develop that to say, see you in the future. Maybe the budget for all that's in your group of 2,000 people in your local district, and you decide which company you want to take it up, and you know, so you can solve the problem yourself. Really?
Yeah.
And actually,
And
it's
it
not
can
rocket
be
science.
done.
Today in Glasgow, the SNP Council have given £1 million to every district in Glasgow for the community to invest in see fit, which I think is absolutely amazing. What's not so amazing is I don't think anybody knows about it.
Yep.
And the same people that spend it today will decide what to spend it on, because we haven't engaged people. But it's a step in the right direction, and that type of thing, I think, is what we need to talk about with people.
Absolutely, Alex. And actually, it's an interesting point. In terms, we were all agreeing at the beginning that of our conversation today that an in-person event was important, and was in a sense, it was a return to how things used to be done. But it's something that everybody's been missing for 2 years, more than 2 years. And so, is that then reflected in terms of the campaigning that you've been doing, and what you're hearing on the streets and on the doorsteps in Aberdeenshire, in terms of people wanting to engage in in-person conversations, a two-way flow of information, both politicians and campaigners campaigning, but also listening and reflecting and turning it around? Is that something that you've seen happening while you've been campaigning recently in Aberdeenshire?
Yeah, I think so. I think people maybe don't realise that's what they want, but it was today when people were coming into the conference, there was just this sort of energy of people being able to see one another again, and people go, oh, it's so nice to see you, because no longer on a screen. I think that's the case. The conversations I was having, certainly on doors, were like that as well. People go, oh, you're Jennie, I've seen you on social media, I've seen you on this. But getting to actually speak to someone, yeah, that's certainly going to be key.
Absolutely. And in terms of the nature of potential future campaigns for independence, I know there has been planning and work done in terms of encouraging and supporting people to have in-person conversations, not confrontations, not debates, but to support, I'll use the word, ordinary people having ordinary conversations, and citizens having conversations in their daily lives with the people with whom they interact in their daily lives. So it's not on a political platform, it's not in a town hall, it's in the conversations become part of our daily lives. So do you think that with the return to in-person meetings and in-person events, the world opening up again post-COVID. Do you think that we're going to see more and more of those kind of discussions at a citizen-to-citizen level as we start to think about what is next for independence in Scotland?
If we initiate it, I think there's a reality that the main spark will be there'll be I don't know, an explosion when the referendum date is announced. But the main debate will be the 3 months in the formal campaign period.
Yes, of course.
So we have to be smart about when we put all our energy in for a real big push. But I believe in Scotland approach, starting small with litter picks or whatever, introducing, planting some seeds now, and that being scaled up in that final 3 months could be hugely powerful. It needs now. The other thing all the movement talks about, we need leadership. So we have to put trust in some people. We have to let them lead. It doesn't mean the people that we know will necessarily be the faces that we present, but we have to trust some people to go away, get locked in a room, thrash it all through, take all this input and everyone else has to put trust in them, and we have to give them our funds and fundraise for them and to come back out and give us their. We can still do everything else that we want to do in our own diverse groups as well, but if we want an impact and different visibility and to engage our fellow citizens, I believe that's what needs to happen out of this conference.
Jennie, Alex makes an interesting point. In large businesses, I've always felt that those, even though they're huge organisations, they still run better if there is somebody standing at the front. If there is somebody, whether they're actually making the decisions or not, but there is a leader, there is somebody who's the focus, and my view has always been that broadly in organisations, people are happy to stand behind a leader and to run in whichever direction they've pointed, because that's in the nature of people who are trying to make something work or make a difference. You've run your own small business in Aberdeenshire, but again, I think I would argue the same aspects hold true insofar as you were very much the figurehead of that. So do you think that that approach, that having a leader, having a clear leader is something that is necessary, or for a national organisation or a national campaign, would it more likely be a number of different leaders, or how do you see that playing out?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think we are looking to one, but then we're going to need to know sort of on a lower level as well, I would think, particularly maybe local levels. Well,
that's the thing, and I'll expand, now I think about it, I'll expand this point a little bit more. We know people like Ron Wilson, who was very involved in the leadership of Yes Kintyre, and Yes Campbellton, who's still very active in the movement and would be recognised, I think, as being a leading campaigner in that rural part of Scotland. And to your point, campaigning and the issues on the doorsteps are very different, or can be. They're not always, but there's certainly a difference in emphasis between rural Aberdeenshire and Castlemilk in Glasgow, or Lochee, or the Western Isles. So do you think that notion of a network of leaders, of local champions or local organisers, local leaders, that is something that might play better, in terms that it doesn't have to be, but it might be local voices, or voices that are more attuned to local issues or local ways of doing things?
Well, I think you spoke about geography before, and that's part of it. Without being difficult here, I don't think anyone understands sometimes how the Highlands and how the North East works, because there's just such vast sort of areas to cover. To get from settlement to settlement, the roads network, things like that. It shouldn't come down to that, but it needs to be people here who know the area and know who they're dealing with.
That absolutely. But can we then, or should the independence movement then build networks and ways of supporting those local leaders in order that we have a national campaign, but one that resonates and works, that people can understand from their perspective in their lives what sort of difference an independent Scotland would bring to them, be they in the Western Isles, or be they in Aberdeenshire, or be they in Castlemilk?
I guess that's what happens with days like today as well, because you bring all these groups together, and we've brought them all together, and it's not just been obviously from here, it's not been just from up in Aberdeen that we're having these discussions about how we bring it all forward in all our various different areas.
It's an interesting point. Obviously, with the population, the demographics in Scotland weigh heavily, and and as a result, there is a drag to the Central Belt. There's a drag to Edinburgh and Glasgow to an extent, but in terms of a campaign, I'm always struck by the enthusiasm and the vitality of local Yes groups across the country. I'm thinking of Yes Island, and Colonsay, for example, who are very enthusiastic, just as an example. So do you think that national but local mix, do you think there's Alex, I'll ask you this question first of all. Do you think there are prospects for that local but national mixture making progress in a campaign?
I think that's the dichotomy that we have to solve. I think the local element is already there. That's what we've done up until now, 40 groups, however many groups. I think what people seem to want is the national level. So I think the answer is to have both. Give people the autonomy, the support to do what they do, but let's put some of our resources funding into some national level thing. And then in terms of leadership, at local level, the best leader would be someone who's visible, that people see contributing to their community.
Yes, yes.
At national level, then we are in the world of media and social media, and part of that group, whoever we trust, to go away and prepare for a number of months and be smart and get campaigning expertise and social media and all the stuff that's at our disposal within the movement, they need to figure out how to play part of that game. Now, I'll try and do this without mentioning names, but in terms of leadership of the new movement, whatever it's called, there are lots of people who I would have jotted down before, maybe even just not that long ago, that have inspired me, that have been fantastic. I believe the leaders is none of them now.
Right.
Unfortunately, like fine wines, they have made their contribution. They can lead from the middle and the back. They still have a part to play. They are hugely inspirational and talented. They can still inspire all of us, but to inspire and engage our fellow citizens, new diverse faces will come in place. Then part of the game is also celebrity and personality. So I will mention a name, but if Paolo Nutini came out with a pro-independence song along with Jerry Cinnamon, that would only help. And we have people that can go and influence that, make that happen. It's amazing when you put your mind to it when you happen. But if we have that kind of master plan first and then delegate that to some people, I'll do that part if we want. I'll find them and track them down into it. And that's a bit flippant, but we need to think all that through first, and then we can make it. We've got the talent, resources to make happen what we want to happen, but we have to think about what's right for the situation now. What do we have to do something a bit different from what we've done before?
That's a very interesting point, because we've certainly seen, we'll talk about, come forward and be very clear about either a more fundamental thing, and I'm thinking of Sir Billy Connolly there, or have made a transition from no to yes. I'm thinking of people like Ewan McGregor. So in terms of campaigning, Jennie, do you think that, and also we've seen in politics in the US, and I suppose there's an argument that in terms of the practice of political campaigning, the US is I was going to say forefront, that doesn't quite get it right. Innovation is strongest in American campaigning because probably there's more money in it. There's an argument that UK campaigning follows on from what the US has done, and I've certainly heard it said that campaigning in Scotland follows Westminster. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I've heard that said. So with that background, do you think that the nature of celebrity endorsements or prominent citizen endorsements, do you think that is that a net benefit, or is it a net hindrance as people object to being told what to think by TikTok influencers or whoever?
I don't know. I think it's great seeing celebrities like Ewan McGregor come out in support of it now, but it can't be quite so pushy, I don't think. I think it's got to be seeing people in campaigning on social media, it tends to be short. It tends to be those short 30, 60 seconds, and why an issue, and it just has to be one, is important to them. That's probably more influential than just a big voice keeping saying the same thing over and over. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
I think, Andrew, just coming in on that,
Yeah.
if I'm saying we're going to develop and maybe do things differently, that aspect we would also want to be different as well. I can assure you our fellow citizens have more wherewithal and are not fickle to make a decision just because you and McGregor told them.
Yeah.
Right. What they people can do though is raise the engagement. Our future will be based on whether we can engage a conversation with our fellow citizens that they believe the type of future that we describe to them will be better for them and an even better Scotland when we become independent. So what we should, if we use those techniques, is get those people to raise the profile, but we need to be there with this stone built on stone. A celebrity endorsement, I want independence, is built on sand. It's gone a day after. We're talking long term here. And the most powerful thing those celebrities could say to our fellow citizens is, if you believe in Scotland, get involved. This new movement has started these conversations. It's in your area. This is what's happening. Then we need to be ready. We haven't organised that.
Yes. It's an interesting point that in terms of that dynamic with endorsements, and it certainly struck me that one aspect potentially to it is simply that emphasising or amplifying the message that independence is normal. That, why is it a surprise that a celebrity has endorsed people's right to choose in Scotland and independence? Why would they not have done so? That kind of change, I don't know if it will reflect the way in which the campaign and the debate, the national debate, has evolved and continues to evolve. So we will see. One other aspect, I suppose, that, and again, I'll move off from celebrities in a moment, but there are celebrities and celebrities. There are voices that that work well in local areas. It's a bad example, but I'm thinking Robbie Shepherd for the North East, for example, just as a completely random name from the past. But whereas Paula Nutini will play particularly well in Paisley, for example. And so that nature of local voices and voices that people recognise, again, is that reflected in the kind of thinking about campaigning locally and nationally that you're hearing or you're seeing?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure on that one. I don't know if that's...
I don't think we should overemphasise that. It
Yeah.
helps. It's icing on the cake if it engages people. Ultimately, what we're asking our fellow citizens to do is to be leaders in their own lives. And everybody can be a leader.
And well, that's
and enable that for them as well.
And that's an interesting point in terms of the people having the self-confidence or the confidence in their own lives to do anything, to do things, but also that then translating forward into having the confidence and the self-confidence to organise or to assist in the organising or to participate in the national conversation and the national campaign.
To give them the systems and the options and the policies for them to then feel it's worthwhile taking part, that they can shape something.
Yep. And do you think in for example, in rural areas like Aberdeenshire, and I'm making it sound like the Western Isles, it's not, not at all, but I was, this is very strange, it's a wee while since I've been back in Aberdeen. I was struck by the quality of the ploughing as I came up through Aberdeenshire today. Some of the most spectacular ploughing I've ever seen. It was like a Zen garden, some of the ploughing. It was beautiful. Anyway, the point is the nature of campaigning in different parts of Scotland. Do you think that we are going to be able to build the network and build the mechanisms and encourage government to help, or the parties to help, in terms of engaging in a way that local people will respond positively to and will make a difference?
I hope so. I hope so. That's the only thing I can say about that. I hope so. I hope we can get there with it.
All right, that's grand. Well, we've had the chance to have a great conversation this afternoon talking about independence, talking about a little bit about UK politics, talking about campaigning, talking about the Aberdeen independence movement, the National Yes Network, and talking about today's brilliant Progress to Yes conference that's been taking place in Aberdeen. So I'd like to say thank you to you both Alex and to Jennie, for your time and your contributions this afternoon, because we're out of time this afternoon and that was our final question and final discussion. In making these programmes for you, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our independent approach to news, current affairs and culture. We rely completely on your financial support, and so please subscribe or donate to Broadcasting Scotland in order that we can continue to make these programmes for you and in order that we can maybe make some more. So please, you will find the link to donate or subscribe to Broadcasting Scotland on your screen now. And if it's not showing on your screen just now, please watch tomorrow night at Scotland at 7 and you'll definitely see it on your screen then. If you would like to support our work in other ways, you can visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot, or you can find us on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland, or you can follow us on Twitter at BroadcastScot. But that's our time this afternoon for the Full Scottish. So again, I'd like to say thank you to Councillor Jennie Nicol and to Alex McCulloch for their time and their thoughts and their contributions today. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I hope that you enjoyed a tasty Full Scottish today. We will be here again tomorrow evening at 7 with Scotland at 7, so please join us then. But for the meantime, bye-bye.